Good evening, everyone. I'm Hailey Coxon, and this is Mountain Memories, episode 11 on the Spirit of Motorsport TV. Welcome back. We had a little bit of a break last week, but thank you, everyone that's joined us already. Andy Karush, good evening to you. Always great to see you pop up on here. He says, evening all, it's a warm one. Just in from work and quenching the thirst for the Guinness. I like that. Nice. I'm a bit jealous there, Andy. John O'Sullivan, thanks for tagging your friends in. Get everybody tagged in. Don't let them miss out. The replay will be available, but they will miss out on the opportunity to chat with the boys, ask questions, get involved in the conversation. So we have quite a special coming up for you this evening for Mountain Memories episode 11. The boys are due to join us in any minute now. Before they do, I just want to remind you, this is interactive, so get involved in the conversation. Tell us where you're joining us from in the world. I know you're from all over the place when you join in the conversation here on the chat. So please do let us know where you're tuning in from. Get your friends tagged in so you can enjoy this live experience together. Now, we've got some great pictures coming up to you this evening. Royster has brought some for the show, but also Bill Snelling from FoTTofinders has contributed a bunch of fantastic classic photos of the great Mike Hailwood for this evening's show. So we look forward to sharing them with you very, very soon. Keep saying hello, keep sharing your comments. Graham Clutterbuck says, got me a cuppa ready for another top hour of Mountain Memories. Ian Anthony Huntley, good evening to you. You are watching. Welcome. And John O'Sullivan says, hello all. All right, so if you are a Facebook user, you must click that StreamYard and share your details so we can see your name pop up. Good evening, Aidan. Fantastic, you're joining us. All right, guys, so without further ado, shall we get the boys to join us in the studio? We can get going with this Mike Hailwood special. So, Mr. Barry Wood and Roy Moore, good evening to the two of you.
Evening, campers, whatever you may be, in which part of the world, as we always say, from Ramsey Hairpin. And it's usually me that sorts the job out. Barry's here. He was well ahead of schedule tonight. Full of excitement and stories about Mike Hailwood, and certainly we've got a few. It was an absolute delight, Hailey, to meet you in person for the first time. You were back on the island, back on your homestead. And we met up outside the grandstand, and then had a bit of a special do with the Mike Hailwood remembrance at the back of the grandstand.
We did.
Delight to see you in any other form of medium than through a screen.
I know.
I'm very impressed with the real thing. And
oh, stop it! It's hot enough in this room as it is, Royster.
I think Teddy Kizik summed it up quite well. I think. Post, didn't he? So that would be it. Yeah, so we've recovered from the onslaught of the crows, so to speak. Make a good movie title, that wouldn't it? And what a great program it was for episode 10. And Barry, it was entertaining value, but Mike Hailwood, when you mention his name, it's a bit special as well.
Absolutely is, and I think when you mention Mike Hailwood, it depends on your age, really, what you can remember. I mean, with all respect, you can remember Mike's whole career from start to finish, race-wise. On the other hand, you know, I tend to split it into three parts, two of which overlap slightly. The early days when he was a young kid, mixing it with the established stars at 18 years of age on the Clips course and the mountain course. And then the later years, the MV years, overlapping into the late 60s, the great race in 1967, which I missed by a couple of years, which I've never accepted that in my life. I know everything about that race, but I just missed it. And then, of course, his later career, when he came back, 1978, 79, which I can remember very clearly indeed. So, you know, I suppose anybody now who's under the age of 50 won't even have seen Mike Hailwood race on the Ironman, will they, really? Because
no, probably not.
His last race was 1979, so even if you were 80 years old then, you would be pushing 50 now. But it was a name I was brought up with, and Hailwood was good, but you won't remember him, you know. And when he eventually came back, it was I've talked about it lots, I've written lots about it, and it was a magical time indeed. So 50 years later, we have had something to celebrate last week, of course. First ever win at the TT, and not just the one win that week, are they?
Well, it'd be 60 years, wouldn't it?
60 years, sorry,
60,
yeah.
61. Yeah. But my kind of recollection, you can appreciate, we have mentioned lots of stories on the Roy and Barry site, but it's all written down. But when you get an opportunity to talk about it, it becomes a bit more real, if you can call it that. It's very difficult to express your feelings when you're trying to write it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But you have to appreciate that we were kind of a nomadic family in the mid-50s. My brothers had disappeared off for national service. We had to move house. That was obviously a family dispute on, and we were getting moved about. But the advantage of it was, and we have mentioned this before, I had Jeff Cannell as first cousin and Jack Cannell as Uncle Jack. So we finished up, me and my mother, living with them in the park in Onken and Nursery Avenue. And then we went to Prospect Terrace. Then we were back again. It was all over the place. But when we did come back, it was to Avondale Road in Onken. And we were fully aware of what was going on because the Cannell family were then based in Nursery Avenue in Onken. So we weren't too far away from one another. So you didn't have to buy a paper when Uncle Jack was about. Every conversation was about motorbikes. And he'd mentioned about a young 18-year-old who was coming to race in the 1958 TT, which was a world championship round. But it was on the Clips course, and that's another thing that we've mentioned about the Clips. You're there with the background of Quarterbridge, and that's the TT mountain course. But the Clips course was brought into being in 1954 purely to allow 125, 250 and sidecars to come over to the island with the 350, 500 to compete for world championship points. And it was devised round the Clips and Kerridou reservoirs and incorporated a bit of the old mountain course, but going backwards direction and then a bit forwards later on. But Uncle Jack and Jeff were getting all excited about this 18-year-old who'd made a big impression on the short circuits and had done a bit of winning. But his father was a millionaire. He owned Kings of Oxford. And it tended to kind of overshadow, really, to be fair. They all felt as though he was getting the best bikes and this, that, and the other. But my first ever recollection of Mike Hailwood, we were based in 7 Avondale Road in Onken, which was part of the Clips course. And you turned right at the Manx Arms in the main village in Onken and came up past Avondale Road, past our house. But one practice night, and they had to fit all the practices in, bearing in mind that they had practicing on the mountain course as well. They had to practice on the Clips. And we were in the garden of 7 Avondale Road. And this bike coasted across what was the kind of centre point of Onken Village, the Blue Dragon Cafe. And somebody said, "Oh, that's Mike Hailwood, number 21, I think he was riding at on the pattern, the 125 pattern." And the doorway of the Blue Dragon was packed with attractive women. I wasn't aware of that at that time. It was the last thing on my mind. I wasn't sexually active at about 8. But they just went absolutely ballistic about this young 18-year-old who'd stopped virtually outside the door. And I think there is a photograph somewhere about that.
I have a photograph in the book here behind me. It was too awkward.
It was really kind of a moment. And then that was how my first introduction to Mike Hailwood. We watched him on the mountain course. We watched him doing his practice on the Clips course. That is exactly. It was a night like this, as you can tell from the shadows. And that was. I get that. How many years ago would that be? 58. I'm 74, so it's what, 66 years ago. Dear, oh dear. And the memory is still that clear about that. And we looked out for him then. But Uncle Jack was saying, oh, his father's wealthy and this, that, and the other. He was very forceful in his opinion. Those who knew Jeff in his full flight too would say, well, he was a bit that way inclined as well about it. But that picture there on a night like tonight is just, it's a wonderful thing to have your memory. And by gum, I could just picture him going a little bit further into the lay-by where the bus lay-by is now, and dismounting, and those girls there on the front. Teresa is the one on the left-hand side, and then I'm not quite sure of the other two, but they were all there. There was like a fan club, and they were in a position where nobody bothered too much. They all went and kind of stood by him, and he was smiling at them, and certainly they were smiling at him when he stopped. And then later on, when the racing started, I think he retired. Or he finished 7th on that. I think
he did.
Yeah, that's the pattern. But later on, he was dicing with Ubiali and Pravini in the 250 class, and I was getting all excited about Hailwood. Hailwood's dicing with Pravini and Ubiali, and Uncle Jack just stood back. He said, just you wait. He said, they're only playing with them. He said, you just wait the last couple of laps. He said, they'll be gone. And they did. And they contested amongst themselves who was going to win the World Championship points, which were on offer. But to be fair to him, Mike Hailwood finished in a 3rd place. And which, when you look at the entry for that particular one with the teams that were there, that was a terrific achievement.
Well, the other thing as well at that time, Mike wasn't just coming to learn the TT course, which all newcomers know what a challenge that is. He had to learn 2 circuits, didn't he?
Yeah.
And the Clips course, it wouldn't have been the easiest course to learn. You're still talking, what was it, 10.79 miles?
10 3/4, yeah.
Yeah, and out on that back part would be very, very tricky, I would say. So he had to learn the TT course, and he had to learn the Clips course as well, which was
something cropped up the other night too. About 58 was still drawn from the hat, and as a newcomer, now you wouldn't expect to be in the top 20 of the system as it was. But when it was drawn from the hat, he started in, I think, the junior at number 11, and he would be a newcomer to the mountain course, and out there, as Barry has quite rightly said, learning 2 courses. The Clips course and the mountain course, and kind of leading the field to a certain extent. And he did very well as well. I think he was 17th in the junior on his first year. I've got the stuff somewhere about just to make sure we don't slip up too much. But that was the way it was when we did. I think he was a 17th, and it was quite good. He was a later starter in the senior. I think he was 57 in the senior. But Mike Hailwood. So that would be 58 when he first arrived on the island.
And we've had quite a few comments here, boys. If we just, I'll just touch on these if that's okay. Phil Looney says Mike was my absolute hero. Phil Nelms says evening all from down south. Great to see you guys again. Andy Cruz says I was 9 years old in '78 and remember it well. My dad was a massive Hailwood fan, and I didn't fully understand the importance of the win. But I'm sure my dad had a tear in his eye. I probably said it was dust at the time. Very good. Lorraine Nelm says, good evening. Sue Russell says, hi, everyone from New Pen, Gloucester. Brian Spooner says, good evening, all. Simon Heath says, evening from sunny Cheshire. And Halmara from Niagara Falls in Canada. Good evening to you joining us on YouTube. Keep your comments coming in, guys. We'd love to hear from you and where you're joining us from. Roger Barnes says, saw Mike at Alton testing for TT and rang MCN, did not believe me. Made a cine film at Ballasper 1978 and got his autograph in 1979 and my TT supporters card. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Well, boys, he did. For me, growing up on the Isle of Man, the first time I heard of the Hailwood name was on our roads. I was thinking at the Hailwood Centre, but he they've named roads after him, haven't they? And on the new estate that got built, maybe 30 years ago now, they've named roads and streets after him. And that was the first time I was made aware of him. It wasn't until I got older and I got into the racing, I realized how much of an impact he'd made on our mountain course and on the history of our event. And it's so special when it really brings so many people together of different generations when you mention his name. And you see on your group, on your Mountain Memories group, when you bring up the Hailwood name, even on the day last week when you guys were at the Hailwood Centre, the different stories and the experiences from the different generations, it was fantastic, wasn't it?
It was. I met a lot of people older than me who had some fantastic stories of those times, although I had stories handed down to me as well. I actually made I knew about it, but I was telling Roy earlier, I found an old Sun 100 program. A lot of people don't even know this. 1957, 3 entries from it. It says JMB Hailwood. It will be SMB Hailwood. It was exactly the same bikes. I'm sure he didn't ride there. But interesting to know he actually did enter the Sun 100 in his very young days. He done a couple of Irish road races. He done the Northwest 200 as well, Mike. He also, then he had a winter in South Africa, didn't he?
Yeah, that's what he used to do. There was a fella called Frank Cope.
Frank Cope, yeah.
An old fella. Well, he was old to me. Then it's like people are saying now, he said that old bugger Roy Moore. But and he was racing, and he fell off at Governor's Bridge, and that kind of ended his career. Frank Cope, he used to ride 250 Nortons. Because it was only 250 125 that he was in. And Port Elizabeth in South Africa, which was like millions of miles away to a fella brought up in Spring Valley and Tynwell Street. So school, so you kind of, it was South Africa. You didn't have a clue where it was on the map. And you didn't know much about it, but they all went to South Africa to race in the winter. And certainly Mike Hailwood was in a position where his old man could afford it. But he didn't. I think he appreciated that he was quite wealthy, Stan Hailwood. But I don't think that he threw an awful lot of money at Mike in his early days. He had to beg, steal and borrow. And later on, when we get into the 60s, it wasn't a given thing. Like on the 250 in 58, when he first came to the island, that was a John Surtees owned bike, an NSU. The pattern, I think he bought. And it was purely because the way things worked out, we were in a disappointing era because we'd had 56, 57 of Works Guzzies, Works Giuliras. All the Italian marks were all blasting around the mountain coast. And in 57, it suddenly came to an end. The Italian factories withdrew. But what it meant was there was an awful lot of talented engineers who were working for various companies over there, like Guzzi and MV and Giuliera and Marini. And suddenly they were unemployed. But they had the ability to make the engines. And Giuseppe Bertoni was one who came out and developed the pattern. The one that Mike rode was a single cylinder version, but later on in the history of pattern, they became very competitive. Bergamonte wrote one, and certainly when you think now of the classic TT with Ryan Farquhar and that, those are the machines to have. Steve Linsdale.
Fred Stevens
won
a double at the Northwest 200 on patterns.
On a pattern. So it was a disappointment not to hear the big sounds of the 4-cylinder jobs. The Giuliras, the MVs stayed. And again, in Mike Hailwood's career, going into the 60s, there's a whole new story unfolds about that. So 58 when he first came, 59 he came back. It was still on the Clips course. He competed the 125, 250, but I think he retired in those races for whatever reason. And then, of course, when they went in 1960 to the mountain course, he was right at home then because he'd had 2 years experience on it, Barry.
He really come on then. And this was after he'd come back from South Africa, and that season lasted 3 months down there. So whereas everybody else was maybe working all winter, whatever. He was racing in the sunshine. And when he come back for the new season, it really brought him on. But didn't he ride an awful lot of different bikes as well? We're talking like quite apart from there was Ducati, EMC,
Suzuki, wasn't there?
Loads and loads of different bikes.
We've got some more comments here, boys. I just share them. Gary Dickinson says, "Hi, folks from home of the Wesleys in Epworth. Mike was my all-time racing idol and was over. He was over for his victorious return." Nadad says, "Good evening, Barry and Roy." Brian Spooner says, "I remember as a lad going to Webster's of Stoke, and there was a photo of Mike at the cruise shop. They were a long-time sponsor of Mike in the early days at Alton Park." And Hayden Williams says, "It was great when Mike raced the Hondas at the TT, especially the sixes, which sounded superb, echoing around the TT course." And Roy Chambers says, "Hi." Phil Nam says, "Very much enjoyed Hailey's videos from the Hailwood Centre, nearly made up for missing our bruise there in the TT." Well, hang on, Phil, because at the end of this show, we've got a couple of videos from that event to show you, just to give you a little bit of a fix, and it's pretty special. So we've got lots more pictures to show you as well, and so many more memories from Roy and Barry. So I'm just going to bring some more of these great shots in. So Royster, you sent over. So this is just going back to your.
Yeah, that's on the line. Yeah, line in 58. Just obscured a bit, Mike, in the background, but that familiar Acura Sportive logo, I think they'd allowed it on the side of the fairing, and that is a regular visitor to the island is Roberto Patoni, and that's his dad. And it was again an arrangement. I don't think there was anything in this particular one. Obviously, later on, Stan negotiated with Honda for dealerships, and we've got the stories of 61 when the Honda was acquired because of a commitment that he would import Hondas into the British Isles. But this was just purely Pepe Patoni, I think, is it? Giuseppe was his name, I think, wasn't it, Barry?
Giuseppe Patoni. Yeah, that's the man there, the original.
Yeah,
man. Yes, yeah.
And that's in a special book as well, because we went away to Froberg to do when Peter was doing a bit of racing, or it might have even been when we went to spectate. And for whatever reason, there was a pattern there. And of course, Royster got stuck in straight away. And once they found out you weren't a bullshifter and you knew what you were talking about, and then actually unfolded what you were involved in, it was a lovely moment, because we got perfect English-speaking Italian, and we went through, and he realised that you were there, and I got that book that I got those two photographs from. Signed by Roberto Patoni, and it was a memorable half hour that we spent. All the boys were taking the mickey out of me, Brian and Peter and Kevin and all that, yawning and stretching and scratching around and watching. But I wouldn't have missed it.
But what a wonderful experience to go to those places where the machine head in the first place and things. Oh. We went to a shop out near Sachsenring in East Germany where they used to have the Grand Prix, and there's the MZ Works.
Oh, Walter Carden.
Yeah. There's a museum there. Not that I've travelled very often, like I've never even been in the south of England, but I actually was in East Germany twice, and we got to there. And
you weren't in prison, were you?
I was looked after there. I was looked after, but very, very interesting knowing that those machines were prepared on those premises at the time of Alan Shepard, and Mike himself rode MZs.
Yeah, not over here.
Not over here. He was in America, wasn't he?
Yeah, he rode in the World Championship for Walter.
Hans Rosner, all those people. And Hans Rosner, also a taxi driver from East Germany.
Nice. They're everywhere. All right. So, Royster, this is another one of yours. We do have another shot of this coming up in Bill's pictures too. But what a great! Is this on your Mountain Memories page? Have you pulled it from there?
Yeah, no, we probably got it from somewhere, but I think it's 59. This one when he rode at AT 18, was it? Possibly.
NSU.
Yeah, that's the NSU.
Yeah.
No, that could be 50. Oh dear.
58, I think, is it?
Yeah,
Is it
could well
58?
be 58. Yeah, that's when he finished third, possibly. Now that would catch a few out on where is it on the thing? The Clips course was different, obviously, but that is part of the TT Mountain course, and you'd have to be sharp to find it. Like, but at the same time, it's part of the Clips course was that you came back onto it to go onto the mountain course. That we can do a quick lap if you want, but at the same time, when you came back down through on the course, you missed the dip out at Governor's Bridge, and that's taken from the top of Victoria Road by the grandstand, where you very, very quickly or shortly will have gone past the exit from the dip at Governor's Bridge. So it was a popular spot for photographers because they could nip away from there.
And a much quicker corner as well as a result of that Governor's Bridge. It's like when they said Sammy Miller come off on the last lap and pushed in. That would have been a heavy tumble there because it wasn't like falling out of Governor's Bridge at very slow speed. It was a much quicker exit onto that straight there in those days on the Clips course.
I had special privilege to watch in the Government House Gardens, which was the wall by it. And I can remember two of those fellas there.
18, yeah.
That's the third. Cravini on the left, Ubi Ardley in the middle, battling for the lead coming in on the last lap, coming into the dip, missing the dip out at Governor's Bridge.
Fantastic.
And they had a rivalry, even though they were both riding for MV. They reckoned that to stop interfering with the bikes, they used to sleep alongside the carburettor, so the boys wouldn't mess about with them and stuff like that. And they came in, and by God, when you see about dirty riding tactics, you know, you say clean rider didn't stick his arms out. They were actually as close going into there, fairing bashing, I think it's called, and arms and elbows out, just determined to get the run out of the Governor's Bridge onto Gwen Crutchley Road. And I don't know what the outcome of it was. It might even have been that particular race in 58. Although I don't think so. I think it was another one because we were watching from Avondale Road on that occasion. So that was the race. So he was 18 in that one. So that would be the NSU of John Surtees. And that's the area that the boys go into now, isn't it? When you turn right into Park Ferme.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
Great to see colour photographs of that era too, that the one of the pattern. That was the early days, really, of the colour photographs of the TT. It was predominantly black and white before that, but I've seen several photographs of these bikes in colour.
Still clear, though. That's going a bit later, yeah. That's the first win, I would suggest. 61. And again, the same area, because it's Pravini's in the middle, but it's a 1-2-3. Because again, when you were talking about Stan Hailwood, he negotiated to get a hack bike, as they described it, off Taviri's for Mike to ride in the 125 in 1961. And it was number 7. And it went quite well because he rode at 7 and Taviri at 5, and they were 1 and 2 in the race. And all Mike had to do was kind of stick with him once he'd taken the advantage up. And but it went off song on the last lap, and he just about held on. It was a deal that was negotiated and reported in the books that was negotiated by Stan Hailwood in 61 that to give Mike a competitive edge, or give him a better edge than what he'd probably been entered on. But he had a Works Honda, but it wasn't. It was a Works Honda, but it was the worst of the Works Hondas, if you can describe it as that. And
he was at a further disadvantage, really, because it wasn't his chosen class as such.
No, he was a big
the other modifiers he had were much more mundane machines up to that point.
Yeah, they were twins, the 125 Hondas then. But he did the double that day. He went out and won the 250 in the afternoon at the expense of Bob McIntyre, which Ian Huntley will straight with. Yeah, the plaque on the Sulby when he nearly did the 99.58
or 85.
Yeah, and then blew it to bits on the last lap. So Mike inherited that 250 win, but at the same token, the 125 was his first ever win, which we were celebrating along with you, Hailey, up at the back of the grandstand.
We were. We've had some great comments here again. We've got Doug Lowe saying, hi from Burton-on-Trent. First year of my apprenticeship in 1978, our college tutor took the class over in a bus to see Mike's comeback. Wow. We saw him take the checkered flag and that was it. I had to race there. Took 9 years to do it, but did it 5 times. Amazing story, Doug. Brilliant.
Excellent.
Hayden Williams says, evening, Pat. Hello to Pat Slynn. Pat Slynn says, hello to us all. Your book about Mike's return in 1978 is awesome. Yes, guys, if you are a fan of the great Mike Hailwood, you've got to get a copy of Pat Slynn's book. A great behind the scenes and different eyes on that time as well. Hayden Williams says, hi, Rowan Barry from Wales, where my local Aberdare Park got me interested in motorcycle racing, including Mike Hailwood, who won everything there, including all the lap records in every class. Thank you all for doing this.
Thanks so much, Tony Godfrey.
Brilliant. All right. So
Barry's on the thing of how many times Mike fell off. But that photograph in the background of you, Hailey, is one which probably wasn't reported very often. He didn't fall off on this occasion. It was purely, and that's a painting, I think, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
The background is not quite right, so looking on that. But we were watching one practice night in our usual place when this would be 62, I would
62,
think it would be, yeah. Just up by that telegraph pole or lighting pole behind your left ear hole. And Mike Hailwood came down on that particular bike with a full fairing on, by the way, and it just went from him. It just slid to ground. And the marshals picked it up and he picked himself up. There was absolutely no injury. They parked it up and we were watching the rest of the practice there. The next thing, this flamboyant character that he was, Stan Hailwood, arrived and wanted to know the ins and outs of how he'd fallen off. So the only way you could get it was from the marshals. And again, it's another one of those Blue Dragon moments where you can picture myself sitting on that. You're not allowed there now. Private property, keep out. But that was our regular haunt. And to get to that, you went under the bridge on the right-hand side on a ledge. And many a morning practice, Mike Kane will tell you, that would be the thing, the haunt from because we moved to Spring Valley then from Onken and Avondale Road. And morning practice under the bridge on the left, either go out towards Braddon or on the right, come and watch them coming down into Quarterbridge. And Mike Hailwood's been off, but you know there's other offs on the island which are significant.
Well, we were mentioning it casually, not that I want to dwell on those things, of course, but we were reckoning five times Mike maybe dropped it, obviously.
Yeah.
That one, yeah.
Well, this obviously is a very famous story in itself. 1965 senior. I only learned recently about this that Aggo and Hailwood actually, although it always said Sarah's Cottage, it was actually further up the road from that. There's a left-hand kink as you exit Sarah's, and it was up there. And I posted some photographs of this recently. There's Stan on the right there. But obviously, one of Mike's greatest ever achievements to finish that race. And you can see the damage, obviously, at the end there. There's no screen. The clutch lever is bent all over the place. And the bike didn't even sound too good, did it, when you heard it afterwards? It didn't sound because of the flattened megaphone, which he tried to do his best with, but he got going again, you know. And don't anybody ask any awkward questions on here about how he got going. He just got going on. All right. Yeah. It's always an interesting discussion, that. But yeah, and Mike's last year at MV at the TT from 1966 onwards, he was very much the Honda years, wasn't it?
It was, yeah, Honda years from there. Because again, they floated. He went to MV again on a private, Privat, on the tank, and him and Gary Hocking were teammates. 61, he had the wins on the Honda, and then whatever happened, it was private MVs. And 62, I can remember that as well. The old man suddenly arrived home with a van load of cake and pop tangos. I said, "Where are we going, Dad?" He said, "We're going to watch the races, but we're going to sell cake and pop up at Keppel Gate." He said, "I've had permission from Rhodey Tate."
Great name.
Rhodey Tate. Yeah. And that's the old story about Tate and Kate's Cottage. And he said, we're booked in for Monday, Wednesday and Friday. So I said, "Oh, that'll be okay." And he promised me a vast fortune in wages. And that my recollection of that particular year, 62, is of Hocking and Hailwood coming round the 33rd and just getting a chance to glimpse over by the time I was opening tangos, would you believe, with like a lever where you pressed it in one side of the can, turned the can round and pressed it in the other so you had an airflow. None of this fancy take the ring pull off it. And slabs of cake from Lowey's, the wholesalers at the back of Sydney Street there. And I didn't remember too much about that. Well, I do remember
the Hocking Hailwood dice.
The Hocking Hailwood dice.
62 junior,
yeah. And Tom Phillis, and not learning until we came back down off the mountain about the fatality of Tom Phillis, who was involved in the early days of that. But there's often reported about that too, about the rivalry between Hocking and Hailwood and whether they were under instruction. But I think it was genuine mechanical issues at the end of both the senior and the junior that gave each respective wins. But you don't know, do you?
I think in the junior that Hocking had some problems. I don't think Mike's bike was 100% either, was it? But
no.
His was slightly less off-song than what Hocking's was. But just looking at that picture of Mike there, that number 5, he was number 5 in the senior, 3 years on the trot. So it's very difficult if you're showing a picture of him to pinpoint which year it was. 63, 64, 65. He was always number 5 yellow, and it's quite confusing. I posted a photograph a while back, and I said I couldn't tell you what year it was. But I had a question I would like to throw out myself. I'm always very curious why Mike was never number 1 in the TT race. Despite all what he did, he never ever started. He was number 2. He was number 2 twice, to my knowledge. Never started at number 1. And you would think with all what he achieved, it would have been an accolade for him, wouldn't you? But he never had that. Was it something he didn't want? Was he, didn't like it? He was number 1 in other places. I've seen a photograph of him at Sachsenring, the East German Grand Prix, number 1. But he was never number 1 in the TT, and that surprises me.
Yeah. There's a lovely bit of information in Pat Slynn's book, amongst many, many other things. I mean, they're still talking about them down in Palace Road, about the noise they created on the morning. And we'll not give too much away. Go out and buy it because you will enjoy it. But as to the allocation of numbers in 1978, there was a bit of information revealed as to how that came about. And it's another bit of history that I didn't know anything about, and certainly is well worth picking up on. It's well documented, and where you go. And I have to when you read the book, you stand back. Didn't know that, and certainly later, you would have no idea of what the situation was with regard to machinery and bits and pieces like that. As I say, a very good investment, but that was one thing that I picked up on pretty early on. But that's a good start there, number 1.
Yeah. If you look at that photograph on the screen there too, you can see the old pillar box.
Aye.
Sent into the wall and gone. But I'm not advocating you do this when you're driving on the Douglas roads, which are chaotic enough. But as you approach the roundabout and look across the road, you can still see where that was. It's like a very light coloured cement at that spot there.
Many a night on the way somewhere in Uncle Jack's whatever car he had. He changed his car every 3 or 4 weeks, and Jeff and myself would be thrown in the back to go somewhere and all that. If he had a letter to post, wouldn't be unusual for him to be driving up and parking alongside the letterbox and sticking the letter through there, and then away you went. And we had a nice little correspondence from Steve Parker, father of the runner-up in the parish walk, Liam Parker, and they had a similar one on May Hill in Ramsey, where they could just virtually park alongside the letterbox and throw the letter in, and away you went.
Yeah. Well, you wouldn't be allowed. You would take your life in your hands doing that. Then, even if you were allowed to do that, it doesn't bear thinking about.
We've had another comment from Hayden Williams saying he was number 2 in the 1966 senior when he beat Agostini by over 2 minutes. Yeah.
He was also number 2, I think, in the 1963 junior on the MV. And there's a famous picture of him. The bike went on to 3 cylinders, and he's coming round White Gates with 3 fingers in the air, which means 3 cylinders. That was that race. And it was a photograph I put on a while back of him up by the Port Jack Chip. Well, just be the Port Jack Chippy when they stayed at the Douglas Bay Hotel, and Mike was riding the bike down past towards Port Jack Chippy to the old way, and that was number 2 as well.
I had
that number 1 to my knowledge.
Jeff and myself had the magic experience of when he was doing that, no crash at, going up to the weigh-in. The shortcut then was up Mona Drive and up underneath the arches. And to hear a 4-cylinder MV Augusta with a kind of just a shirt on, no crash at, taking it up to the weigh-in, Mike Hailwood going up under there, slipping the clutch in bottom gear on the 4-cylinder MV Augusta is another kind of memory that will stay in my life. We were aware that it might be happening, and of course, as soon as Jeff got anything at all that was going to be different, come on then, we're off. I wasn't Royster then. I had to get dragged round for obvious reasons because I was probably under his care, and wherever that we were at garages at the Bay Hotel, they must have given them the nod that they were going. So we were on our push bikes and off down then to underneath the arches, so to speak. Long gone now.
They must have been quite a good strong clutch on those. I would hate to ride a TZ up the arches right before the start of a race. Imagine the clutch being wrecked.
He wouldn't be worried about that. Although people say, oh, he didn't have a mechanical knowledge. When you read into the books and all that are very readily available, he wasn't too far behind when it came to knowing how to perform. To jump on a twin cylinder or a single cylinder 125, 250, and then to be able to actually ride the 6-cylinder Honda in between MV Augustas. And remember, he rode a BSA at Daytona and won on it as well. So he had a mechanical ability. There's absolutely no doubt about it. It's just that when you get the Stanley Schofield things, he kind of pleads a little bit ignorant. How many gears has it got? I think I've found 14 so far. He knew exactly what he was on about. And he was just kind of, I think what happened with Mike was that he was kind of maybe not resented by his other riders. I think they had a terrific respect for his ability, and he was a good lad. The Paddy Drivers and the Jack Aherns of the Continental Circus said he was a great bloke to be around, and the mechanics loved him.
He was so normal and an impish sense of humour as well.
Yeah.
A couple of great stories in the Tommy Robb book, which I find quite amusing. You couldn't do it now, but Tommy said that he was asleep one night at a Grand Prix, and he was aware of some activity outside, and when he looked out, he seen Hailwood and Ralph Brown's walking away, but they tried to hook Tommy's car up to another van to drive him 5 miles out around the course so he would wake up there. But then when that failed, they went to Guy Marsovsky's van.
Guy Geiler, yeah.
Put a couple of Jubilee crocodile clips on his fingers. He would give him a dose of electricity. Are you allowed to do that now? Wasn't the TT going up to one of the top rivals? Just I'll just electrocute him, you know. He's gone there.
We've got a great comment from Ian Anthony Huntley here saying Murray Walker commenting at the Craig in 1965 said that Mike had a nosebleed, but later he corrected it. Mike actually had a red tape on his nose to protect it from his goggles. Brilliant little piece. They're going back to 1965, but excuse me.
Yeah.
So that's a Peter Haynes painting. It's pretty special, but the background's a little bit off, but the bike is absolutely stunning. He's got it right on point there, hasn't he?
Yeah, that's superb. Was that the colour?
Snugborough was the original copy of the Snugborough when it was a little kind of tight left.
The old Snugborough.
And there was a little low wall where the entrance to the Snugborough trading estate is now.
Did you ever watch down there?
Yeah, I did, yeah. When I was working for, I can't say that, can we? Douglas Corporation, when I first went to John Devereux, the greenkeeper, he said, where are we going this afternoon then, Royce? I said, what do you mean? He said, we've got to watch the races. I said, but I'd been brought up on 10 years of total commitment to the job where you weren't even allowed to listen to the commentary. And here we were making arrangements to go out. And he said, it's got to be somewhere we're not going to be seen. So down the Lurgy Crippity we went and watched the race. And it was a Grand Prix, I think, from, I think Ken Huggett won it. Steve Moynihan or Ken Huggett would be the winners of that. And we watched at Snugborough because it would be a possibility that nobody else would be able to see us there.
This was the great race, one of the greatest races of all time, when Mike came back in 1978 and won the Formula One race. And of course, I as a young boy, like early 70s, if you looked in the scorecard for the race that day, invariably it always used to have the lap and race record holders at the time, and it was always SMB Hailwood Honda, you know. And I remember asking about him. Oh, he doesn't race now, but he was good, you know. And always this name. And then it come to late, 1977, and the word was going round that Mike was thinking about a comeback. He wasn't heard of 72 to 77 because he was car racing, and his contract at that time with the cars prevented any two-wheeled racing activity. But he got badly hurt car racing. I think it was at the Nürburgring, severe leg injuries. And then the word was going round that he was thinking of a comeback. He did a lap the previous year, just a sighting lap. And then all the plans were brought in together. Now, this is all in Pat's book anyway, but just talking about it from my own perspective as a young boy at the time, hard to imagine the excitement that Mike Hailwood was coming back, somebody I'd heard of in the past but never witnessed. And it was an exciting time anyway, because you had all these other names. Like you had names like Ron Haslam was coming, and Pat Hennon was coming back, and some top Kiwi riders were coming. But above all that, Mike Hailwood was coming back, you know. And the excitement leading up to the TT and the programs coming out, and then you had all this fever of team, all the different clothes, remember the martini coats and the sports motorcycles, T-shirts and the old bush hats that they used to wear. And the very first night's practice up at Bedstead, waiting to see Hailwood, just to see what he looked like, you know, because all the pictures I'd seen was black leathers and goggles and the old style helmet. But this was what I can't remember which bike he came around on first in practice when I got my first glimpse, but I remember it being a strange sensation, you know. And as the practice week went on, he performed very well, and it became apparent he had a very good chance of winning the race, certainly the Formula One race. The day of the race, which the Saturday, there was an early morning practice, and I went up to Bedstead to watch that. And I just got home and put the wireless on Manx Radio, the practice report. Peter Neal said that Mike Hailwood had a tumble this morning at Braddon Bridge, and there was this. Oh God, surely not. And fortunately, he was okay. But you'd always think that there's more happened than what they're telling you. But I literally got home, had a cup of tea, and went straight back to bedstead. Although the race wasn't until much later in the day, had to save places. We had to have the place to watch that race. Massive crowds, very, very hot day as well, And of course, it was a great race because you had the obvious, inevitable Hailwood Phil Reed competition. You had people like Tom Herron, all the other top men of the time, John Williams.
John Williams was in there.
And so much has been said and written about that race, but fast forwarding to the last lap, the emotion that I witnessed, I've never seen anything before or ever seen anything again like that. Human, like, hard-looking men, like Hell's Angel type, crying in the road. And just magical. I was so moved by all this. I actually wrote a big essay and sent it to the local paper, the Manx Star, and he printed it, and I got paid £3.30. Yeah,
professional fees.
That was this race, and you could go on and on about it.
There was a lot of thing about the previous year, 77. There'd been a little bit of skullduggery, if you can call it that, and Phil Nichols was denied a possible win on Roger Nichols on the sports motorcycle. So not only were they backing Hailwood, but they were also backing sports motorcycles as well against the might of Honda. And certainly that was it. Yeah, crying when he won.
We've got another great comment here from Patrick Slynn. Pat obviously played a huge part and had a great experience with Mike Hailwood and the crew. In the Palace Hotel, there used to be panels in the corridor walls. If you remove these panels, you could flush the loo. Somebody told me that when you're in your room alone, to hear the loo flush was scary. Apparently, Mike and friends were behind this.
Yeah, dear me.
Brilliant. So we've just got a couple more great shots to show here, boys. So this is again.
Can I ask a question instead of people asking those questions? Can I ask a quick question?
Please do.
To everybody who's there, when Mike won the 1967 Diamond Senior TT in his big dice with Agostini, what did he have for breakfast that morning? This is a genuine question. If anybody knows that, pop the answer up on the screen.
Come on, people, get involved.
Yeah.
See who's first to pop up. Come on. So this is 1979, I believe, this shot, boys.
79 senior, his Mike's last win. We were up at the bungalow that day, which was a place we rarely would be, but for 2 days that week, we would offer the lift up to the mountain section. And again, I remember that so well. And you still had Ian Caddell at the bungalow then, didn't you? So it was exciting because he was across the road looking back towards the veranda, anticipating the bikes coming. So he knew when to expect them. And 114 fastest lap, which was very, very quick at that time under the circumstances. Then that led on to the big race on the Friday, the showdown between Mike and Alex George. Alex was on the Works Honda. It was a race that Mike wanted to win. It was going to be his last race anyway, I think, his last TT. And I think it was 3.4 seconds at the end.
It wasn't much. I remember.
Very, very close.
Yeah, very close. Yeah.
Very, very close. And I suppose a lot of people, their heart of hearts want Mike to win his last race, but a race is a race, and it put Alex on the map big time as well. So
the situation developed where, due to circumstances, we were privy to a little bit of inside information direct from the horse's mouth and a very reliable source. And it had been asked, what went wrong. And in a kind of, shrug of shoulders, he said, well, unfortunately, he said, I came across a few lower order riders, as we like to refer to them. He said, in the wrong place at the wrong time. And he said, I wasn't forceful enough. He said, I should have gone for it and taken them and done it. But again, the personality and the setup and the makeup of him, he was a gentleman. Old school. And that didn't. Now, when you think about it, you look at the MotoGP last night on ITV, and it's definitely, there's no love lost between any of them. But he was respectful to other riders of any ability, and he'd been brought up that way, and he maintained it right through to the very end of his racing career on the island. And there's another nice little combination there too, that this isn't in Pat Slynn's book. Details on numbers are, but Mike Hailwood won his first TT in 1961, riding at number 7, and finished up his career riding in the senior of 79 at number 8, 7 and 8 consecutive numbers.
Brilliant. We've had a couple of answers here. We've had Roger Barnes is first in with kippers for breakfast.
Sorry, Roger, that's the wrong answer.
The wrong answer.
Oh, we had Ian Anthony Huntley had kippers there as well. Then we had was it kippers for breakfast by an unknown? Andy Creech says kippers and jam and bread and butter. Interesting.
Very interesting, but completely wrong there.
Do we leave it to the end of the show? Do you still allow people to come back with the answers?
Knows. I mean, it is in print. That's all. I mean, it's not the trivia fact. I don't know or don't know. If anybody's read a certain book, they will know what he had because it was a regular race day TT breakfast for him. So we'll leave another 5 minutes. If nobody chimes in, well, we'll do it.
Before we move on to the last picture, boys, and then the videos of the bikes that were at the Mike Hailwood Centre last week, we got a couple more comments. We got Hayden Williams saying, yes, Mike's 7th senior TT victory, saw the classic TT at Hilbury. They were frighteningly fast. Stephen Hallam says, nice to hear all your Manx voices after missing the last 2 years. Roll on TT 2022. Steve in Sheffield. Yes, Steve. David Hughes says, just a guess, bacon butty and a black pudding. Oh, okay. At least it's different to kippers.
Excellent guess.
Okay, very good. Brian Spooner says, I remember Mike at Donington Park leading practice and Sheen saying, who's this old boy blitzers? Brilliant. Great. Well, we've got to bring this picture up, boys. We have to, because it's the classic, isn't it? That classic look. And I know at the Mike Hailwood Centre, is it the Manx Museum that were there, Roy, with these leathers? They had them on display, didn't they? And you could actually, you weren't supposed to touch them, but I had to, obviously. I could, but yeah, they got them on display there.
We were based externally for most of the day up there. Just another thing that crops up as well. In 1961, when he had his first win, we looked up. We played it, I think, during the course of the day and mentioned it. Number 1 was Surrender by Elvis Presley. And then when he finished up in 1979 with that senior win, it was Sunday Girl by Blondie. So there's another 7 and 8, and those 2 particular records. So that was it. They've got that number 8 machine. I don't think it's too clever inside, but physically, externally, it looks as though it looks like the number 8 that he won on. It was purchased for the Manx Museum by David Cretney, who was then director of tourism, I think, at the time, or involved in the TT. And there are plans really well advanced at the moment for a new museum to coincide with 22 when the TT returns, and Matthew Richardson is in charge of that, I think, down there it's going to be based at people get a bit mistaken sometimes. They say the TT Museum is at Derby. It's not going to be. There's a museum at Derby of bikes and cars, but the TT Museum will be based in Kingswood Grove in Douglas, top of Crowlands Hill. And it sounds as if it's going to be quite an exciting place to visit. So that's something else to look forward to.
Absolutely. We've had Ian Anthony Huntley's guessing scrambled eggs, and Don Jones is saying, was it breakfast in 1961? Was it a full English?
Pay attention to the question.
Yeah, it's coming. The answer's coming. So we've already mentioned and touched on quite a bit of the commemoration really to his 60th anniversary of his first TT win last week at the Mike Hailwood Centre. With everything that's been going on, it almost didn't happen, but the organisation there and the team managed to pull it together, and they did a fantastic job, didn't they, boys? It was really special for everybody to come together, really, and there were so many locals that contributed to it, didn't they? We had local riders and owners of replicas bringing in and revving up the bike. So we're going to play you a video in just a sec. But Barry, it was great to get together, wasn't it, and really experience that day.
It was the best thing that's probably happened in the last 2 years, more or less, since the Grand Prix in 2019. Nothing really has happened since then. And that's the first event I was at where there were a lot of people in the same place who all had the same passion. And the bikes and outfits on display were brilliant. Great to see them and hear them. But the main thing was getting a chance to chat to true fans. You know, the stories like we talk about ourselves. You could talk all day and all night, and then the likes of Bob Julie, people like that. Just these characters were there, and it was magical. It was magic, and it was something we all needed. You know, we can't get any road racing on, so that was the next best thing. And so glad I went, dude. It was a great day.
Yeah, it's difficult to comment when you're involved, but full credit to Dave Ronan and Adrian Earnshaw, who I think were behind it. They're members of the Mike Hailwood. Adrian has been a member or one of the instigators of the Hailwood. And it was very appropriate as well, because in 2020, Pauline Hailwood was lost to us, and she'd made the big effort to come over. The year escapes, and would be 81 or 82, to actually open it. And there we were celebrating 60 years of Mike's first win and hearing these sounds. My neighbour in Victoria Avenue was very impressed with it all. He was that impressed, he sent the police round to congratulate us on making such a... And I think you'll understand why. But the repercussion of it was that Adrian said, yes, okay, but we've got one little finale. You'll have to put up with this. And I think it's what you've got lined up, really.
I have. But we've just, before we do move on to the finale, we've got to show Des Connor's bike, because that's where the policeman was walking up, and he was just still going. He was going, and he was going hard at it, and he didn't really give a damn. And everyone was very happy. It was fun. Just great, isn't it? Yeah. So that was just as we were about to get told off. We've got a couple more guests here, Barry. We've got Craig Porritt, I think, full English with cereal, and Andy Cruz says 2 boiled eggs.
No, but I thought he was nearly right there. Bear in mind he was doing the Diamond Senior TT. He probably wouldn't have wanted a full fry up anyway, so that's a little thing. Anyway, when you want to wave the checkered flag on this, tell me, and I'll...
Yeah, we will. We'll keep them going. Keep your answers flying in, guys. Our last one. So this is the finale. So the theme of the day to commemorate his 60 years was sounds of the 60s. So Royster mentioned some tracks there that were getting played. Great sounds of the 60s, but obviously sounds of the engines of the 60s as well. So many great engines getting fired up. This is the finale. What a day for it as well. The sun was beaming. It was brilliant. We've got Graham Clutterbuck saying scrambled eggs. David Hughes saying poached eggs and black coffee. All right, Mary, what does he have?
Well, we're going to run out of time. He had 2 chicken sandwiches and a glass of milk. And if anybody who has the black hardback Hailwood book called Hailwood, the mic on the front, there's one chapter is dedicated especially to the 1967 Diamond Senior TT, and it mentions in that, if you can dig it out and read it, that Mike had his, I forget what time now, but he had his usual pre-TT breakfast of 2 chicken sandwiches and a glass of milk. So nobody got that right. I'm disgusted nobody got that right. But anyway, a bit of crack.
I was not expecting that. Fantastic. So, gents, another great theme to the show. Brilliant work. Great shots. Thanks to Bill Snellian at FoTTofinders, and thanks to you boys for your efforts and your passion. And it's really honoured to sit here with you for an hour and hear your memories and remind people as well of the page. It's on Facebook, isn't it? It's a private group, Mountain Memories. So it's Roy Moore and Barry Wood's Mountain Memories. Is that right, Barry? You just need to send that invite in and join the page. These boys are on there every day, sharing their knowledge, moms, their pictures, their stories, everything. Patrick Slynn says, thank you for a wonderful show. Hayden Williams says, thank you all again. Andy Cruz says, I've got the book and I'm going to double check. Lenny Ritzy says, brilliant show as always. Thank you, Lenny. Always great to see you pop up on here and contribute to the chat. So, boys, we've got the Southern 100 coming up, haven't we? I'm going to be back on the island once again, so I cannot wait to be back for that.
Yeah, they're having a day down at Balown and Colas Balown, and we're not sure what they've got lined up, but I'm sure with the organisation down there, everything will be. I know Derry and the purple helmets, and there might be a few bikes, and there might be lots of things, and we're hopefully going to do. This is a kind of, we don't get involved in anything that's been announced about TT in the future. We're purely on Mountain Memories. But hopefully, if we get everybody sorted out, we'll be doing, and again, I've been privileged to have been driven down by Uncle Jack, sometimes at bloody frightening speeds, I must admit, along past the airport. Dicing with Kenny Harding in a Bedford van one memorable night I can remember, with Jeff flapping in the back and me totally unaware that we could have been killed at any minute. But heading down to the Southern 100, and certainly we're privileged to be able to report on stuff like that. So as a build-up to their particular day, not only is Barry remember Southern 100s, he's actually rode in, and there's a fantastic photograph of him coming out of Iron Gate, and certainly we'll be able to kind of put my memories in of being there for most of it, practically all of it, I think. But we can't remember too much about 55. It was a Thursday afternoon. Terry Shepherd and Derek Ennett won, and it started off a sequence of events down there which have lasted to this very day, and again sadly missed for the last 2 years, but going to be remembered on a build-up and then leading into the Southern 100 Day.
I think what they're trying to achieve is the paddock as it should be on race day. I think they want to bring some race bikes and vans down and just have people there who will have a bit of a chat and a get together. The hot dogs, of course, famous hot dogs, but everything.
Not chicken sandwiches.
A glass of milk.
You never know, but they've never done it in the last 60 years, so I don't think it will happen this year. But everything except racing, such a shame. And I mean, every time I drive down the bypass, I just think maybe next year, And
definitely next year.
I even stopped yesterday in the middle of the road and took a photograph of Ballachagan, and I nearly got knocked over doing that. So it was like, who's this lunatic? But, looking forward to getting down there. And of course, now there's been some change in the or a situation, there might be some characters there we didn't expect to see. So see what happens.
Well, we'll be there. We'll make sure that we can post. I'll be posting some pictures and videos on the group as well. We've had a couple of great comments here. Charlie Hull says, great show. See you all at Southern 100 show coming over on the 8th of July, celebrating our 36th wedding anniversary. Brilliant. Phil Looney said, didn't want to show off with the chicken sandwich because nobody likes a Smartie tick. Great. Listen, boys, thank you. Oh, it's absolutely brilliant as always. Thanks so much. I will see you on the island in a couple of weeks' time. And yeah, thank you once again. Take care of yourselves and have a fantastic evening.
See you, Hailey.
Back to the grandstand.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, every single one of you, for joining us and joining in the chat, getting involved in Barry's question as well. It's always great to see all you regulars jumping up on here, and lots of new names as well. Remember, don't worry if you jumped on late. There's a couple of people there saying they jumped on late. You can watch the replay. If you know anybody that will enjoy this show and appreciate it and they've missed it this evening, make sure you tag them in and share away. So if you are not watching on YouTube as well, make sure you click the subscribe button so you can continue to be sent notifications when we are jumping on and sending any new content your way. You can stay up to date with everything. All right, so it was our absolute pleasure to bring to you this evening a Mike Hailwood special in honor of his 60th anniversary on Saturday the 12th of June of his first ever TT win. Boy, did we have a great day at the Hailwood Centre. And so many great families, local legends in themselves, are bringing their replicas and their bikes and firing them up. We had the Knight family, Harrison family, Crow family, all of them there and getting involved. So thank you once again for joining us. I'm Hailey Coxon. This is the Spirit of Motorsport TV, and I'll leave you with this.